Welcome to another deep dive. We're really glad you could join us today.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
If you're preparing for a major policy meeting, or maybe you're just, trying to catch up on the structural dynamics of the federal government.
Or even just looking to understand the specific individuals who are currently pulling the levers of American power.
Exactly. If that's you, you are definitely in the right place. Our mission today is to unpack a really comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing the list of current United States senators for the 119th Congress.
Which sounds a bit dry at first.
Right. At first glance, you might assume a directory like this is just a boring spreadsheet of names, dates, and states.
Just raw data.
Yeah. But when we look closer, it actually serves as a highly detailed map of the human terrain of the United States Senate. We are going to explore the unexpectedly diverse backgrounds of the people wielding this power.
The hidden mechanical quirks, too.
Oh, absolutely. The loopholes that determine how they actually secure those seats and where they officially rank in the grand hierarchy of the American government.
And just to set the ground rules for today's analysis, since we are examining current political figures and structural data involving both the Democratic and Republican parties, we're playing this strictly down the middle.
Total neutrality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We will maintain strict neutrality throughout the discussion. There are no endorsements here. We're not making policy judgments. Our focus is entirely on imparting the factual data and the structural mechanics detailed in the source material, just so you can understand how the institution operates right now during the 119th Congress.
That neutrality is so crucial because today we are looking at the bare metal blueprint of the institution itself. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right, let's dive in.
Let's start with the raw composition of the chamber as it stands in January of 2025. We have 100 members total.
2 representing each of the 50 states.
Yep. And the current breakdown is 53 Republicans, 45 Democrats, and 2 independents.
Though we need to pause on those independents.
We do.
Yeah.
Because regarding those 2 independents, Angus King of Maine and Bernie Sanders of Vermont, they vigorously protect their independent branding back in their home states.
Oh, fiercely.
But the source material notes that functionally, within the halls of Washington, they officially caucus with the Democratic Party.
And that procedural reality fundamentally changes the math for how the Senate operates.
How so?
Well, caucusing with the Democrats means King and Sanders sit in on the Senate Democratic Caucus meetings. They align with them for all organizational purposes.
Which is everything in the Senate.
Right, it's a rigidly structured body. Things like committee assignments, floor time, legislative scheduling, all of that is distributed based on party blocks. So while their ballots say independent, the structural reality absorbs them into the Democratic machinery.
Giving the Democrats a functional 47-seat voting bloc when organizing the chamber.
Exactly.
And on the other side of the aisle, holding 53 seats, the Republicans control the majority leadership. You have Senator John Thune of South Dakota operating as the Senate Majority Leader.
With Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming serving as the Majority Whip.
Right. For the minority, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York is the Minority Leader, alongside Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois as the Minority Whip. But beyond those party wranglers, the constitutional leadership of the Senate introduces a completely different dynamic.
It really does.
The Constitution designates the Vice President of the United States as the President of the Senate, which currently places Vice President J.D. Vance, a Republican from Ohio, in that role.
Because Vice President Vance holds the tie-breaking vote, it shifts the entire strategic landscape for Senator Thune and the Republican majority.
Because he doesn't actually represent a state in a voting capacity, right?
Right, he only casts a vote in the event of a deadlock. But practically speaking, having that ultimate tiebreaker in your column means the majority party only ever needs 50 reliable votes rather than 51 to push through an entirely partisan agenda or confirm controversial nominees.
It makes every single defector crucial.
Absolutely. But it provides a significant mathematical cushion. Now, when the vice president is not presiding over the chamber, that duty falls to the president pro tempore.
Currently, that's Republican Chuck Grassley of Iowa.
Yes, he holds this title as the party dean, since he's the senator with the most seniority in the majority party.
And that seniority translates directly into the day-to-day operations of the chamber.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this rigid structure of majority control and strict seniority dictates absolutely everything about who sets the agenda.
Right. The 53 Republican seats don't just represent A voting advantage.
They represent total control over the committee chairmanships. The source material highlights several of these shifts.
Yeah.
You have Republicans like Tom Cotton of Arkansas chairing the Select Committee on Intelligence.
And Tim Scott of South Carolina chairing the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee.
And those committee chairs wield immense, often unseen power. They decide which bills get hearings, they control the scheduling, and they have the authority to just bury legislation before it ever reaches the Senate floor for a broader debate.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the actual individuals sitting in those 100 chairs and wielding that committee power.
The resumes.
Yes, the resumes. There is this persistent stereotype that the Senate is exclusively populated by lifelong politicians who followed a very specific pipeline. You know, Ivy League law school, a stint as a prosecutor or corporate attorney, and then a campaign for office.
Which, to be fair, is true for a lot of them.
Oh, sure. The occupations column in our source document definitely features its fair share of lawyers. But the resumes of the powerful are significantly more diverse than that stereotype suggests. It's not just a quirk of the data either.
It actually reflects the framers' original design.
Exactly. They wanted the Senate to represent the specific economic engines and localized cultures of the states themselves.
And the occupational variety becomes striking when you analyze the specific professional backgrounds these senators bring to the table.
The contrast is immediately apparent when we look at the athletes and coaches. You have Senator Tommy Tuberville, a Republican from Alabama whose listed occupation is college football coach.
Right.
Then there's Senator Markwayne Mullin, a Republican from Oklahoma. Alongside being a businessman and radio host, his resume explicitly lists mixed martial artist. That is a very different kind of professional background than navigating a corporate boardroom.
It really speaks to a completely different style of constituent connection and localized representation. But the variety becomes even more consequential when we examine the STEM and medical fields represented in the chamber.
The technical expertise is actually quite substantial. You have Mark Kelly, a Democrat from Arizona, whose occupation includes U.S. Navy officer and NASA astronaut.
Pretty unique resume there.
Unbelievably unique.
Right.
Or consider Jackie Rosen, a Democrat from Nevada, whose background is in software development and computer programming.
And John Hickenlooper, a Democrat from Colorado, worked as a geologist before entering business and politics.
We also see a very strong, highly specialized presence from the medical field. Republican Rand Paul of Kentucky is a physician specializing in ophthalmology.
And Republican Bill Cassidy of Louisiana is also a physician.
Beyond the technical fields, there is a prominent block of senators whose occupations represent the everyday foundational industries of the country. Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia is a pastor.
A very community-focused role.
Very much so. And then we have a group of senators whose professional lives are deeply tied to agriculture, the very lifeblood of their state's economies. Chuck Grassley of Iowa, Joni Ernst of Iowa, and Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi.
All Republicans.
Yes, all Republicans, and they explicitly list farmer or rancher on their resumes.
Understanding these diverse professional backgrounds is vital for analyzing how the Senate actually functions. The chamber is constantly tasked with debating and passing laws on incredibly complex, highly specialized issues.
Right, like technology regulations.
Exactly. When the Senate attempts to regulate emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, or national data privacy standards, having a former software developer and computer programmer like Jackie Rosen in the room fundamentally alters the baseline of the conversation.
Which means the legislative body isn't relying entirely on
external lobbyists.
Exactly, external lobbyists or policy staffers to explain the basic mechanics of an algorithm.
The same logic applies to healthcare reform. When complex bills regarding Medicare reimbursement rates, hospital administrative regulations, or pharmaceutical pricing hit the floor, having practicing physicians like Rand Paul or Bill Cassidy involved introduces a real-world clinical framework.
Into what is otherwise a highly bureaucratic environment.
Precisely. And we see this dynamic most clearly with agriculture. When the Senate negotiates the Farm Bill, which is a massive piece of legislation that dictates the food supply, conservation efforts, and the agricultural economy for the entire country. Having farmers and ranchers like Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst directly involved ensures the policy is shaped by individuals who understand the localized reality of crop yields.
And agricultural economics. It anchors the legislative process in the actual economic engines of their respective states. It prevents the Senate from operating purely on abstract legal theory.
Exactly.
It really changes how you view the institution. Instead of a monolithic group of identical politicians, it's a geologist, an astronaut, a pastor, and a mixed martial artist all trying to negotiate federal policy.
It's quite the visual.
It is, but navigating the path into those specific Senate seats is not always as straightforward as winning a general election on a Tuesday in November. There are complex mechanical quirks and logistical hurdles detailed in this document.
What's fascinating here is the fine print. When you analyze the footnotes of this Wikipedia page, you uncover a constant churn of transition. It reveals that the transfer of power in the Senate often involves significant logistical maneuvering.
The delayed inaugurations are a perfect example of this.
Yes.
The new Congress officially begins its term in early January. However, the footnotes reveal that Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida had his Senate inauguration delayed when he was first elected. The delay was required so he could finish out his term as the governor of Florida.
And we saw the exact same mechanical delay occur with Republican Senator Jim Justice of West Virginia.
Right. His inauguration was delayed in January 2025, specifically so he could wrap up his executive duties as governor. So the Senate essentially has to hold their seats open while they finish their previous state-level obligations?
It perfectly illustrates how tightly interwoven state and federal governance can be. But even more impactful than delayed inaugurations is the frequency of Senate appointments.
Oh, this is a huge factor.
It really is. While the public generally views senators as strictly elected officials, the source material documents how often these powerful seats change hands entirely outside of the normal election cycles.
Due to resignations or members transitioning to other government roles?
Right. The history of Lisa Murkowski's seat is a prime example of this mechanism. The Republican from Alaska was originally appointed to her Senate seat in December of 2002.
She filled a vacancy left by the resignation of Senator Frank Murkowski.
Who happens to be her father.
Yeah, quite the connection.
He resigned from the Senate upon being elected governor of Alaska and utilized his new executive power to appoint his daughter to his vacant federal seat. While she has subsequently won multiple elections to retain the position, her initial entry was secured through a direct family appointment.
We observe a similar mechanism with Republican Pete Ricketts of Nebraska. He was appointed to his seat in January 2023 following the resignation of Senator Ben Sasse.
But this process is particularly relevant right now in 2025, as the new presidential administration has triggered a massive shift in the Senate map.
Because J.D. Vance was elected vice president, he was required to resign his Senate seat representing Ohio. Consequently, the governor of Ohio appointed Republican Bernie Moreno to fill that vacancy.
And simultaneously in Florida, Marco Rubio was confirmed as Secretary of State,
Opening up his seat.
which the governor filled by appointing Republican Ashley Moody.
It's critical to understand that these gubernatorial appointments are not permanent passes for a full 6-year term. The footnotes explicitly clarify that because of these specific vacancies, both Ohio and Florida are mandated to hold special elections in 2026.
Right. The voters must go to the polls to elect representatives strictly to complete the remainder of the original Class 3 terms.
And just to clarify the mechanics of those classes for a moment, the framers designed the Senate to be staggered. They divided the 100 seats into 3 separate classes. This ensures that only 1/3 of the Senate is up for election every 2 years.
Preventing the entire chamber from being turned over in a single election cycle.
Exactly. So for Ohio and Florida, these specific Class 3 seats do not naturally expire until 2028. The special elections in 2026 are high-stakes, off-cycle battles merely to determine who gets to serve out the final 2 years of Vance and Rubio's original mandates.
It guarantees that the political map is in a constant state of flux. Millions of dollars and immense political capital will be spent defending these appointed seats.
So we have this constant, relentless churn of power. Political parties and individual candidates are fighting tooth and nail, utilizing every appointment loophole and special election possible to secure these 100 seats.
It's highly competitive.
It is. But despite the incredible lengths people go to secure a place in the United States Senate, there is an official document that puts their actual status into a rather surprising perspective. At the very bottom of our source document, there is an official list called the Order of Precedence. It literally dictates the ceremonial and diplomatic hierarchy of the United States government.
Given their immense constitutional power to confirm Supreme Court justices, ratify international treaties, and authorize trillions of dollars in federal budgets, one might assume a sitting U.S. senator would be ranked near the very apex of this list.
Like, just below the president.
Exactly. However, the reality of the order of precedence places them remarkably far down the chain.
It's a fascinating measure of institutional status. Unsurprisingly, President Donald Trump holds the top position. He is followed by Vice President J.D. Vance. Then the governor of whatever state the event is being held in takes precedence.
Following them are House Speaker Mike Johnson and Chief Justice John Roberts.
That initial tier completely aligns with general expectations of executive and judicial power. But from there, the current sitting senators get pushed significantly further down the line.
They fall behind an extensive list of former officials. Every living former president outranks a sitting senator. That includes Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden.
Furthermore, the former vice presidents Dan Quayle, Al Gore, Mike Pence, and Kamala Harris all outrank a current sitting U.S. senator in this official diplomatic order.
The list just continues to prioritize executive and diplomatic roles over current legislative power. United States ambassadors outrank sitting senators. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, outranks them.
The sitting associate justices of the Supreme Court outrank them.
Even retired associate justices such as Anthony Kennedy and Stephen Breyer take precedence. And crucially, all the members of the president's cabinet outrank a sitting U.S. senator.
The structural irony there is remarkable. The Secretary of Agriculture outranks the very senators like Grassley and Ernst who actually write and pass the agricultural laws that the Secretary is tasked with enforcing.
There is exactly one structural exception for the Senate within this hierarchy. The Senate President pro tempore, currently Chuck Grassley, is granted a special exemption due to his specific constitutional role.
He gets to jump the line.
He does. He's placed immediately after the cabinet members. This positions him ahead of the rest of the regular senators who finally take their place in the order, just ahead of the state governors and the members of the House of Representatives.
It offers a very revealing glimpse into how the federal government prioritizes institutional memory, executive authority, and diplomatic representation over raw legislative power, at least in matters of official protocol.
Definitely.
So taking a step back, why should you care about all these procedural mechanics? Why does it matter that the Senate operates on these staggered classes, relies on a constant rotation of special appointments, and is populated by everyone from astronauts and mixed martial artists to farmers and software developers?
Fair question.
It matters because every single federal law, every comprehensive budget, every confirmation of a federal judge who will rule on constitutional rights, and every major diplomatic treaty that shapes the country's trajectory passes through this incredibly specific filter. A filter comprised of exactly 100 human beings. When you understand the varied professional backgrounds they bring from their home states and the fierce logistical battles fought just to get them into those seats, you stop viewing the United States Senate as a faceless, monolithic institution. You recognize it as a dynamic collection of unique life experiences shaped by local state economies, all colliding in Washington to negotiate the future of the country. So what does this all mean?
I believe it points us toward a fundamental tension at the heart of the Senate's design. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, drawing on one last historical footnote from our source material regarding the strict rules of seniority.
Okay.
We analyzed how vital seniority is for securing those incredibly powerful committee chairmanships, dictating who sets the legislative agenda. Well, the document notes a fascinating maneuver from 2002. Republican Senator Phil Gramm of Texas intentionally resigned his seat a few weeks before his term was scheduled to expire.
Why would he do that?
His calculated goal was to give his newly elected successor, fellow Republican John Cornyn, a mechanical head start. Gramm wanted Cornyn to be sworn in early so he could accrue precious days of seniority over all the other incoming freshman senators in his class.
Thereby giving him an edge in future committee assignments.
Exactly. Ultimately, this specific maneuver was blocked by a 1980 Rules Committee policy, neutralizing the intended advantage. But it raises a vital question about the institution itself. We've spent this deep dive exploring the diverse, real-world resumes of these senators. The innovative, localized problem-solving perspectives brought in by the tech developers, the physicians, the military officers, and the agricultural leaders.
Right.
But in an institutional system where actual legislative power, committee influence, and agenda setting are so heavily dictated by relentless rules of seniority and procedural maneuvering, does the Senate truly reward those fresh, specialized perspectives? Or does the rigid structure of the institution inherently favor those who simply possess the political endurance to remain there the longest?
It's a profound structural question. Does the system elevate the best localized ideas, or does it simply empower the individuals who refuse to leave? It is a dynamic to watch closely the next time a major piece of legislation is being negotiated in committee. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the human terrain of the United States Senate. Keep analyzing the structures of power around you, always read the footnotes, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.